Hi, I'm Rob. I'm a dietitian that specialises in weight management. In this week's video, I'll help you understand some of the reasons why many people struggle to lose weight. We'll explore how factors such as human physiology, combined with today's obesogenic environment, has made weight regulation very difficult for many people. Food consumption plays an essential role in the development of obesity. Although this might seem like an obvious statement, the intricacies involved are more complex than we may imagine. We have a lot of evidence that the obesity epidemic, which has developed over the past 25 years, developed alongside an increase in food production and availability in many developed nations. Many thought this increase in food intake was more than sufficient to account for the rise in obesity. On the other hand, some blamed our declining physical activity levels due to more sedentary lifestyles. To better treat obesity, we must clearly understand each of these factors' contributions instead of merely presuming their cause. The current prevailing idea within obesity research is that a combination of increased energy intake and decreased energy expenditure has contributed to the current levels of obesity within our population. Although one side of this coin may be more prevalent for certain individuals, both factors are likely to be present to some degree, especially when analysing this topic from a population level. This is why the argument that obese people simply overeat food does not adequately explain what we observe within our society. Although obesity will ultimately be caused by a positive energy balance, the factors that influence this go far beyond intake alone. It is essential to recognise these factors as they will uniquely influence each other and each individual. Two top-level examples include physiology and behaviour, each of which can be subdivided into several topics. In this video, we will explore some of the factors that contribute to the first side of our energy balance coin. The reasons for eating go far beyond simple nutrition. Humans have constructed a complex relationship with food. Many of you are likely to have broken bread with friends and family as part of a range of social engagements and celebrations. Offering to get a coffee together, although clearly an invitation to consume a hot beverage, really provides an opportunity to spend time with someone to build or nurture social relationships. Of course, the biological necessity for eating can't be ignored. Examining the biological drive for food consumption will always play an important part in obesity research. However, as humans are social creatures, this view alone will not be sufficient to explain the obesity epidemic. Ultimately, we must view eating as a biocultural interaction that has shaped human development for much of our history. Before we take a look at the next topic, I do have a quick favour to ask. If you found this video or others I've made interesting, can I ask that you take 5 seconds to support my channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. Doing this helps the channel grow, meaning I can spend more time making higher quality content for you to enjoy. Although not unique, humans' omnivorous nature plays a pivotal role in our food decisions. For those unfamiliar, an omnivore is an organism that eats plants and animals. This gives humans and other omnivores much greater freedom and flexibility over their food choices. Our omnivorous nature is likely to have contributed to our success as a species, allowing us to colonize many different environments in which the available food would vary greatly. For example, two polar opposites would include the Inuits, who would obtain a significant proportion of their energy needs from fatty meats such as walrus, seals, or fish. Whereas populations residing in warmer climates such as Latin America relied on staples such as corn, fruits, and vegetables. In contrast to obligate carnivores, such as the cat family, human food availability, and therefore choice, is much greater. Thus, factors such as culture, geography, climate, religion, ethnic principles, and even social forces can all play their part in our food choices. This presents a complex variable that human appetite regulation must deal with. This is confounded by the various forms that human food can take. Although generally all foods are comprised of either fat, protein, or carbs, the forms these foods take can range in texture and taste to an impressive degree. Humans now have a choice as to what foods they will eat to meet their nutritional needs. This means that a person's environment will play some part in their food choices. Recent research has focused heavily on this environment relationship. In particular, the dysregulation of nutrient intake and resulting weight gain that environments abundant in hyperpalatable food seem to have on many people. This appears to be an inevitable result of a society in which food provision does not solely aim to provide adequate nutrition for its population, but also seeks to provide taste and texture novelty for both individual pleasure and shareholder profit. The environment humans have built for themselves now means tasty, cheap food is just a few finger taps away. No physical or mental effort needs to be expended to access this food, which can quite often be very high in calories and contain large quantities of hedonic nutrients such as fat, sugar, and salt. Our current obesity epidemic has likely been initiated by extrinsic factors such as the food environment, as human physiology has changed very little over the past 1,000 years. The reason so much blame can be put on our current food environment comes back to human physiology. Many mechanisms are in place to protect an organism from starvation, including increased energy efficiency and increased food-seeking behaviour, which many people likely experience throughout much of human history. However, physiology has rarely had to contend with such periods of food excess. Put simply, in today's environment, undereating is very difficult and overeating is very easy. Does this mean the food industry is solely to blame? Part of the issue may lie within our current socio-economic system. We would do well to recognise the role of capitalism in which the growth of an industry is prized above all else. These priorities have resulted in overconsumption of many material goods such as clothes, shoes, electronics and jewellery. When the provision of food was subjected to the same expectations as these other industries, it seems unsurprising that a culture of excess has resulted in skyrocketing rates of obesity. Throw in food advertising in both physical and digital mediums, and we have a recipe for a health disaster we are currently living through. When we combine these socioeconomic factors with an appetite system that was never designed to regulate against such food abundance, it is no wonder so many people are struggling to manage their weight. It is broadly agreed that weight gain requires eating more calories than we use. This leads many to highlight the concept of KICO, or calories in and calories out. Although this concept makes sense and is essentially another way to phrase the first law of thermodynamics, when discussing the physiology of complex living creatures, we need to accept this model gives a false sense of representation. This means that food intake not only influences the energy intake side of the equation, but also has an effect on energy expenditure. In turn, physical activity not only influences energy expenditure, but also has an effect on energy intake. This picture has been referred to as dynamic rather than static energy balance and is consistent with new ways of viewing appetite control. So what actually stimulates our desire to eat? Numerous ideas have been proposed over the years. One theory suggested that fat tissue, through the release of the hormone leptin, control total energy intake. Although these tissue stores define the state of obesity, there is very little evidence that they influence normal eating behaviour. This can be demonstrated in people living with obesity. We now know that total energy intake is not associated with the total amount of fat in the body, but the amount of lean tissue or fat-free mass. This led to the conclusion that it is the body's energy needs, or more specifically the difference in energy expenditure, that drives appetite. In other words, appetite will grow to meet the higher energy costs of sustaining a larger organism and the resulting increased costs of physical activity. Evidence suggests that 60% of the body's energy requirements come from resting metabolic rate. Resting metabolic rate is the total number of calories burned when your body is completely at rest. Resting metabolic rate supports breathing, circulating blood, organ function, and basic neurological functions. This observation fits in with the long-held belief that most men require larger calorie intakes than women due to their high proportion of lean mass. This also extends to people living with obesity. Although they do carry significantly more fat tissue, they also carry a greater amount of lean tissue to support this fat. Supporting this greater amount of lean mass will lead to increased hunger, even if the individual leads a sedentary lifestyle. This can be very frustrating for individuals living with obesity, as they will battle against elevated hunger as their body tries to defend against any loss in weight. As overconsumption is guaranteed to lead to weight gain, it seems reasonable to assume that fat tissue has its part to play in controlling our desire to eat. As mentioned earlier, and in my last video on obesity risk and genetics, leptin plays a vital role in appetite regulation. Leptin is a hormone secreted from fat tissue. When fat levels decrease through weight loss, the amount of leptin secreted decreases also. The brain can recognize this reduced leptin level, resulting in increased food-seeking behavior. The lipostatic hypothesis presented leptin as the primary controller of food intake. However, this was overly simplistic. If correct, this should mean that people with a lot of fat tissue would have very high levels of circulating leptin and therefore be strongly disinhibited from eating. As anyone living with obesity knows, this is clearly not the case. Further to this, human research has revealed no clear relationship between the amount of fat in the body and the control of food intake. One theory suggests that for lean individuals, leptin does help regulate food intake, as when fat stores increase, appetite will be reduced. However, for individuals susceptible to obesity, increasing fat levels and the associated rise in leptin simply results in leptin resistance. This resistance leads to a breakdown in one of the disinhibitory factors for appetite and resulting food intake. This likely means that the fatter someone is, the more leptin resistance they will have. This may go part of the way to explain the difficulty people living with obesity have in regulating their appetite. This idea is supported by the observation that people living with obesity are more likely to report behaviours such as binge eating and experiencing intense food cravings. These behaviours form part of a vicious cycle that will lead to further weight gain and increased appetite dysregulation. So in summary, our reasons for eating go far beyond biological drive. Eating is a deeply cultural activity for humans and can play a significant part in food choice. Part of the obesity epidemic has its roots in humans' adaptability to a wide range of food sources. Although this adaptability helped our success as a species, the success has now led to an environment of food abundance for much of the Earth's population. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is quite unique in our development as a species, and thus our physiology is very poorly adapted to deal with this food environment. The result of this biology, combined with today's socio-economic forces, has resulted in an obesity epidemic that is unlikely to be resolved through individual willpower alone. That is why I would encourage anyone interested in improving their own health or the health of the nation to support measures to improve the quality of the food environment. If this is something you're interested in, let me know in the comments and I'll explore it further in a future video. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you found this video helpful or informative. And if you did, why not give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And before I go, this is your weekly reminder to never stop learning because life never stops teaching. See you in the next one. Cheerio.